morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Five for Breakfast. We're now on our 6th episode of 2026, and our gold sponsor for Fiber for Breakfast is Conducts. Before I'd like to start, I'd like to give a big shout out to our good friend Mike Romano, who has been recently named the CEO of NTCA to succeed retiring Shirley Bloomfield. Both Shirley and Mike are the absolute finest leaders in our industry, and Shirley be greatly missed. And we could not be more excited for Mike in his new role. So congratulations, Mike. In Washington this week, the House and Senate are in session, and notably funding for the Homeland Security expires on Friday. Yesterday, Secretary Ludnick testified before the Senate Appropriations Committee on Commerce, Justice, Science, and Related Agencies regarding broadband deployment funding at the Department of Commerce. FBA and its members have raised concerns about the proposed low Earth orbit rider contract provisions that can materially alter the foundation performance oversight and accountability standards under the BEAD program. During the hearing, Secretary Ludnick confirmed that the proposed rider is rejected as it falls outside both NTI's guidelines and the statute, and the states are well within their authority to pursue alternative execution options. So what that means, if the LEO guys aren't able to meet the performance requirements, then the states will move to some other technology. We appreciate Secretaries Ludnick and NTI's leadership and guidance as the states implement this complex program. State broadband offices must fully empower to enforce BEAD requirements and reject contract provisions that undermine transparency, oversight, and accountability. We're also pleased to report that NTI has now approved final proposals for 50 of the 56 states and territories. As a reminder, NTI will be holding a listening session today on the remaining BEAD funds starting at 2 p.m. Eastern. Last week, the Fiber Broadband Association held its first Regional Fiber Connect workshop of 2026 in Oklahoma City. We're focused on tribal, and it was the biggest regional that we've had to date. So it was amazing. And we are very appreciative of the Oklahoma Speaker of the House, Kyle Hilbert, his thoughtful keynote address, and for meeting with our members. Also, Judge Bill Gravel at SBA held a roundtable discussion with our Oklahoma members to identify business challenges that he could share with President Trump. Our next Regional Fiber Connect workshop will be held in Indianapolis on Thursday, March 19th. You can go to our website to register. And as a reminder, the FBA will be holding its second annual Public Policy Summit and Fly-In in DC on February 24th and 25th, bringing members together with congressional leaders, administration officials, and federal agency stakeholders to focus on how we can bring high-speed, reliable connectivity to all. So last week on Fire for Breakfast, our guest was our good friend Asad Ramzali, who is the Director of Artificial Intelligence and Technology Policy at Vanderbilt Policy Accelerator. He discussed AI chips and the battle for network innovation, and he shared with us the advances in artificial intelligence, provided some insights on AI-related policy challenges and what to watch for. So if you missed last week's session, you can go to our website and watch the replay. Today on Fire for Breakfast, our guest is Dr. Tamarah Holmes, the Director of the Office of Broadband at DHCD, provide an update on Virginia's fiber projects and initiatives. Dr. Holmes is the Director for the Office of Broadband at DHCD and has been in that role since September 2019. She has spent over 20 years in public sector in the field of community and economic development in New York, New Jersey, and Chesterfield, Virginia. Dr. Holmes has played an instrumental role in the creation of Virginia's Telecommunications Initiative, VATI, and is leading the development of the program that has grown from $1 million to $750 million in appropriations since 2017. She's responsible for coordinating the efforts across the Commonwealth to invest an additional $1.48 billion in funds from the bipartisan infrastructure law allocated to close the digital divide in Virginia by 2029. Prior, in her current role, she was the Associate Director for Policy and Strategic Development Office in the Community Development Division at DHCD. In addition, as serving broadband director, she serves as the Virginia Appalachian Regional Commission, ARC, program manager overseeing ARC's economic and community development program in 25 counties and 8 independent cities in the Appalachian region. She holds a master's degree in urban planning and analysis with a concentration in housing and community development. She received her doctorate in public policy administration from VCU. So welcome, Dr. Holmes. And for our audience, please type in the questions as we go. And I'd like to get started. So Dr. Holmes, a little bit of a rough start, but I'm glad that you made it. So how have you been doing?
Good morning. Thank you, Gary and team, for having me join you at Fiber Broadband Association this morning. Things have been going well in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
So, you know, when we were last, I wouldn't say last together, but we had one of our regional events in Richmond, and it was prior to, you know, right when we were getting ready to have final proposals, and Virginia was in the lead. You had Louisiana, and then it was going to be Virginia. So what all happened? What was all the thing that hung you guys up from being the leaders?
So I've been saying the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program is the longest program I actually hadn't started in my career yet. And so depending on what point in time, I feel like if you ever, I don't know if you remember, like there's a movie, it talks about like things just happening over and over again. And so I feel like with the BEAD program, it's been a long time coming. And so we were actually in disagreement over what we considered at the time perceived as rate regulation. And so we kind of went back and forth with the leadership at NTIA at the time regarding that. And then eventually we finally were able to negotiate something and get our final proposal to go through the process for approval.
Well, great. Hey, so today, you know, NTIA is having their listening session. And what do you know, so Ariel has, or excuse me, Assistant Secretary Roth has been telegraphing that, you know, they're certainly interested in investing in streamlining permitting reform. There's a number of other things. How is permitting in the state of Virginia?
So just to give you a little bit of history about broadband in Virginia, I know you talked a little bit about the VADI program. It's the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative. And so we started investing as a state in broadband in 2017. And so it was a $1 million program, as you said, and it often goes 1 million, 1 million, 5 million, 19 million, 50 million, and then 750 million. And so in 2022, we were allocated $750 million, which included state general fund dollars, American Rescue Plan, and also capital project fund. So we ended up going from a state appropriated program to a state appropriation along with two different distinct federal resources as part of our funding opportunities in the Commonwealth. And so I jokingly say, when you take $750 million and you put it out for grant awards, I jokingly say we broke every possible system that it takes to start getting broadband to communities. And so that's where permitting comes into place. And so we have gotten a lot of bumps and bruises over the last 4 years of doing investments through the ARPA and CPF funding because it was such a huge investment. Again, we went from a $19 million program in 2020 to a $50 million program in 21 to $750 million. And so everything that could possibly happen and be a challenge to get broadband to residents across the Commonwealth happened. We had to have discussions with our pole owners regarding access to the poles. We had, I will say the word railroad, but if you all can do your own research on how that worked out for us there as a state, and then also our utility locations. So I jokingly say we broke every possible system it takes to get broadband to folks' homes. And so we have been working closely with all of our partners across the Commonwealth to get to those connections that were awarded through that significant investment in 2022. And so when I hear permitting, I'm like, I hope that other states are prepared, because the challenges that we experienced, I feel like we're in a better place today than we were 4 years ago around permitting. We have a great relationship with our Virginia Department of Transportation. We're actually partnering with them on our BEAD program. We have a great relationship with our Virginia 811 folks. That's our utility locate organization. We have a better relationship with American Railroad Association. Their Virginia folks have been key partners in trying to get railroad crossings done. And so I feel like we are, again, in a way better place than we were when we first started with the huge increase in funding in 2022. And so we're prepared.
Well, everybody likes to be upset with the Department of Transportation or the railroads, just thinking they're making life difficult. But their number one obligation is roadway safety and rail safety. And, railroads are very, very dangerous places. And, as well as highways, and people can get killed very easily. So just having trucks and things and people doing work, it's a big deal. So it's very disruptive. But there is, we provided some path forward suggestions on how to move forward, and hopefully NTI will take us up on some of our suggestions. One of the questions that came in, so we had the whole benefit of the bargain deal, which freed up $20 billion. But one of the things that one of the questions came in with the overturning of the Digital Equity Act, is there any light at the end of the tunnel with DOP grants?
So we don't know yet what NTIA will allow for the eligible uses for the non-deployment. And so just so you all know, if you haven't paid attention in Virginia, so we did finalize and received our approval from NTIA for $545 million of our $1.48 billion allocation. And so that leaves about $800 million available for BEAD non-deployment. And so we are currently awaiting guidance from NTIA on eligible uses of those funds. And so I won't say that we're not quite sure what NTIA will allow us to use the funds for. And so we are in communication. We have been in communication with all of the entities that have submitted applications through our Digital Equity Act program that was ultimately canceled. And so we will have to stay tuned to see what our opportunity will be of being able to utilize the BEAD non-deployment funding for those potential projects that came in. But just we're not sure what we will be allowed to do yet.
And since, the Virginia Telecommunications Initiative has been around for a long time now, 9 years, you've had a number of different programs, state funding, ARPA, capital projects funds, Reconnect, all this stuff. What progress have you guys done with all this different funding, and what has been the easiest program to administer?
So what's been interesting about the work in Virginia, and so we actually had I call it the big brother to the VADI program, Gary. We had VATIPI, and it's funny, it's one of the first acronyms I ever made in state government. And so we had the Virginia Telecommunication and Planning Initiative, and that was actually in 2016. And so we worked with several communities across the Commonwealth that were interested in, addressing the lack of broadband in their communities. And so a lot of those communities ended up coming in for funding over the last 9 years that we have had the VADI program. And so we've had great success across the Commonwealth with communities getting to universal connectivity. And so we actually got to 200,000 locations as of December 31st of 2025 of the locations that were awarded in 2021 and 2022. And so we're about almost 90% of Virginia currently has access to broadband, and several of the locations that are not currently built out are either currently being built and underway through our investments through VADI, or are waiting for us to get the projects under contract for BEAD. And so we're about almost 90% across the Commonwealth. And we do have, trying to think what I was going to say. We do have some, sorry, I lost my thought for a second. And so we do have projects all across the Commonwealth. And we have some communities that are reaching almost 90% coverage individually if you start looking at them county by county.
And which program has been the easiest to administer?
I like to say my state program because we get to build the rules around that. Like I said, the allocation that we received in 2022 was $50 million in state money. And so I would always say the state money has been the easiest because the VADI program was created in budget language. And I don't know how much you know about how a bill becomes a law and the budget gets appropriated in government. But we were able to develop the program guidelines in partnership with our stakeholders across the Commonwealth, with local governments, with internet service providers, with their association leadership. And so we really have a public-private partnership within the Commonwealth in our broadband efforts. And so that's what I think has contributed to our success. So I would say our state program has been the easiest program. Treasury has been good as well. And so we'll see how it goes with NTIA. That'll be my first time working with them on a deployment program.
Well, good. One of the questions we had from registrants is, what's the ETA or schedule for fiber connectivity in the southern or south side Virginia region?
Southern or south side Virginia. So we do have some projects in southern/south side Virginia. And so I will give you, we do have a publicly facing dashboard. And what I'll do, Gary, is share that link for your attendees to know where to go. We actually have a map that gives real-time updates on how the projects are progressing by award across the state. And so a good chunk of Southern Virginia and Southside Virginia were awarded in 2022. There are some locations that are part of the BEAD program that were awarded to Empower, who's a company that builds in Southside and Southside, excuse me, and Southern Virginia.
So, I was talking to Vineeth the other day from Louisiana, and he said with the combinations of all his programs, they are going to be at 99% fiber across the state, despite, kind of being beaten back a little bit on the BEAD program on their fiber. How are you guys doing with all the combinations of all your programs, how, as far as fiber deployment?
I haven't run the numbers on where we're going to be in terms of tech. We are tech neutral in the Commonwealth, and so even our state funded projects have been tech neutral. We funded, and I'll give you a great example of a county, Roanoke County. They came in with cable, fiber, and a fixed wireless provider on a body award in 2022, and that's going to get that county over 90%. And so I know I'm on a podcast with you. And so I don't have an exact breakdown of where we're at in terms of fiber coverage across the state, but we're tech neutral in Virginia. And so because our program, the body program, actually runs through local governments and units of local government, we defer to them to identify what technology they think would best serve their community. Of course, if you're not familiar with Virginia's terrain, we have terrain that's, from the mountains of Southwest Virginia all the way to the Eastern Shore. So our terrain is wide and vast. And so it will take different technologies to get to every unserved location across the state. And so I don't have the exact breakdown by technology in terms of coverage. I know that more than 90% of our investments over the last 9 years through the body program have been primarily fiber, but I'd have to actually run the numbers on actual coverage to date.
All right, so tell us a little bit about your 2029 goal. What's that? How do you know when you've reached that goal? What are the key metrics?
Well, of course, we track location-based data. I think the best story, the one of the things that I think has made us be successful again is our partnerships with local governments and our units of local government. And so what success to me is hearing from residents and communities across the Commonwealth. While we track metrics, I think metrics are great, and we have the data on where we are in terms of total coverage across the state. It's really the stories and the families whose lives have been changed through having access to broadband. I'm more of a qualitative person, and so being able to hear from families and community leaders about the impact broadband has on their families' lives, to me, is the best way to learn about our impact across the state.
All right, well, hey, one of the notes that came across here from Tyler is that the listening session with NTIA on non-BEAD is actually from 2 to 4 Eastern. So someone gave me the wrong notes, but I just looked it up just to confirm. So yeah, I'll be 2 to 4 today. And I'm not going to be able to make that, but my team will be on that call as well. So anything from that call, are you expecting or hoping that people will bring up?
I'm going to be listening to hear, because I know it'll be a diverse group of stakeholders that'll be on that call. And so I'm more going to be listening to hear what, because I think some of our Virginia partners are going to join the call today and share their thoughts. And so I'm going to be more listening about what they'd like to see the state invest the BEAD non-deployment funding in. And so looking forward to hearing that input from them.
So, I mentioned this whole Starlink rider. Do you guys come across that much where someone will win an award, and then they'll come and try to change the rules that violate the statute and the rules of the program?
Well, remember, I've been running a
thing?
state program. Yeah, I've been running a state program. And so, not in the 9 years I've done a program, I've had, so remember, BEAD's different from our state program. My state program, my contract is with a government entity. And then the government entity has a different contract with their internet partner that has been awarded the grant in partnership with the locality. And so I do not, we are not, I have a PhD, I do not have a JD, and so we do not weigh in on those agreements between our government entities who are our grantees and their internet providers. And so BEAD is going to be the first time the Commonwealth will directly contract with internet service providers. And so I know other states directly contract with internet providers. We do not in our normal allocation. Of course, BEAD changes that. And so I will tell you, even in the early days of the body program, we do share our contract with the governments, and they do share the contract with a lot of their ISP partners. And so I will say, I've not been shocked by having attorneys from internet companies often want us to revise our contract that they are not actually a party to, but a lot of times the localities will pass on some of those requirements, very much similar to what NTIA is going to do with us, where they're going to pass requirements on to us that will pass the ISPs. Same thing in the body program. And so I will say that I have had a lot of phone calls with attorneys from some internet companies over the years that have tried to rewrite our state contract. And the good thing is that we often can figure out, because we don't customize our contracts by project. We have standard language. And so I had to stand my ground a couple of times with attorneys from internet companies. And so, but it's always worked itself out. And so
we were thrilled that the secretary held the ground on that, because it just would unravel everything. With between that and Amazon Leo, asking for extensions on delays to their deployments. So, well, I had Brandy Rader on here a couple weeks ago from Colorado Broadband Office, and they initially had a 70% fiber, and then after the benefit of the bargain, they ended up with 51% Leo. And she was describing how Leo has 4 years to build, which is kind of crazy because they're already supposed to be in the sky. And then there's 10 years meeting the minimums, 100 by 20. So basically it's going to be 14 years to know whether you actually got the performance promise. Are you guys running into any kind of concerns like that, where, critical areas that are very remote are going to be stuck with waiting till 2040 to know whether they really got their 100 by 20?
And so for us, I don't know, I'll share with you, Gary, I don't know if you know our breakdown in terms of the technology awarded through our BEAD program. And so I'll kind of share that first before I answer the question. And so for Virginia, 80% of our locations are going to get fiber, 1% will get fixed wireless, 6% will get hybrid coax cable, and then 13% will get satellite. And so for us, I do know that there's some conversations regarding Kuiper and Starlink. And so we do have both companies that have been awarded locations in Virginia. And so they're currently in their pre-contract phase. And so we are having conversations with both of them regarding what we just recently learned regarding the rider, as well as the timeline extension for Kuiper. And so we will most likely, as you said earlier, defer to NTIA, because those are changes that are being requested across the board for all the awards across the country. And so I'm going to defer to NTIA to provide us guidance on how they want us to deal with those, because we do have to manage expectations. I will tell you, running a program for the last 9 years, when folks hear about money being awarded and them getting internet, they want internet today. And so we have done a good job, I would say, of managing expectations, but with the BEAD program, we'll have to do a better job of managing expectations, because at least with the body program, there's a government in between us who, those community leaders live in their communities. They see each other at Walmart, their local grocery stores, their baseball games. And so we often partner on communications. And so BEAD will be slightly different for us. And so I'm going to defer to NTIA on how they want us to deal with the rider that all the states received, and also regarding the extension for Kuiper.
So now you'll be able to get everybody connected by 2029, which is awesome. But AI has kind of been taking over the world, right? Or as they say, eating the world. And what we've seen from their studies is that AI, the subscribers' use of AI is highly dependent on the quality of connections, where 75% of the subscribers on fiber use AI daily, or less than 10% on satellite, and it kind of goes down between there with cable and so forth. How are you guys looking, your broadband office, at looking at AI and how you're constructing your networks and kind of what the future of what you're going to be doing beyond broadband to make sure that everybody in Virginia is able to participate in the AI future?
And so to answer, so the funny thing is someone told me that, the internet runs through Virginia. That's like the thing we know, right? And so I went through a Virginia executive leadership program. And so that was probably the most I've ever learned about. Our project was on artificial intelligence. And so I learned a lot about kind of where we are as a Commonwealth. And so one of the stats, which I'll repeat, but I can't remember the source. And then I also have to question if it's reliable. And so it talked about like what percentage of Virginia, like we're 9th or something in the use of AI as a state. Again, I was told that source may not be reliable, so don't quote me on that. And so I think part of the work, what's important for us is making sure that, one, my ultimate goal is to make sure everyone has access to broadband. That is the first and foremost goal I'm responsible for doing as the director of the Office of Broadband. And how we get everyone connected, of course, is through a diversity of technology. And so we do in our body program, and will require as part of our BEAD program, of course, BEAD will require speed testing. We actually require that for our state program, Gary. So the investments that have been made in Virginia and that are currently being made across the state, currently under construction, they do have to do speed tests. We get information at the residence level on how the service is performing. And so we want to make sure that we are preparing Virginians for not just their technology needs for today, but their technology needs for the future. And so we are doing the best we can in our due diligence to make sure that happens across the state. And if it includes, making sure families have access to, high-speed, reliable internet to be able to utilize AI, that's the goal that we have.
One of the questions that came in is, do any of your awards include a provision to offer broadband or internet education or training to unserved or underserved communities?
So through the VADI program, as I said earlier, those contracts are with local governments. And so some local governments do put, because remember I said they have a contract with the internet provider, some local governments have put different provisions within their contracts with the internet providers on what they'd like to see. One of our ideas that actually we call it research and development. It's really rip off and duplicate. And I don't know how much you know about electric utilities. So we have a lot of our electric cooperatives that also now have broadband subsidiaries in Virginia. And so they have something that they provide education on. It's called the Cooperative Living Room. And the concept actually started with the electricity going into rural communities, where they would have like a makeshift house and they would show families how do you use, because in the early years of electricity, they also had to convince people to take the service. And so what the electric cooperatives tell me is that they were able to show families like how to use electricity within their home. And so one of our cooperative partners, Rural Band, had a cooperative living room in one of the counties that they're doing a body project in at the community center. And so it's literally a makeshift, it's a room. And so they have like a living room section and a TV room and a kids room, and it shows how you can use smart technology within your home once you have access to broadband. And so one of the ideas, we had early on to utilize, which is public information for our now canceled digital equity grant, was to replicate that regionally across the state. And so some of our communities, and so I bring up that example. So Dinwiddie in their project with Rural Band had that as one of their requirements because they wanted to make sure that their families were educated. And so we do see innovative ideas across the Commonwealth on how communities want to see their residents become educated around broadband access. And so the cooperative living room was a great example in Dinwiddie County, and they've replicated it in a couple other places. And so we were going to try to actually replicate it regionally with our digital equity grant, but that funding has since been canceled.
Well, Dr. Holmes, we just really appreciate everything you've done for Virginia and across the nation and your leadership as the broadband office. And we know that we appreciate you guys hanging in there and keeping your nose to the grindstone as the sands shift beneath you. So thank you for that. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today and look forward to get back together next Wednesday with Michael Thomas of Network Connects, who's going to discuss the hidden infrastructure behind AI and hyperscale networks. So you're not going to miss that. So thanks everyone for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Holmes, and look forward to seeing your further success.
Thank you.